And I'm going to go ahead and record this so we can put it up on our blog site. And that's just some general industrial security trends. And this came from a presentation that Cisco and Rockwell kind of put together. And it's just kind of interesting because you can kind of these couple of charts here kind of paint the picture between the traditional enterprise IT network that we're probably most, well, we as maybe office dwellers are most familiar with, and then the OT network, which, of course, we also wear the engineer hat for the plant floor. So we're not going to read every bullet here, but basically, the environments are different, right? Plant floor versus the carpeted space data centers. The switches are kind of the same, right? You got managed, and of course you have a lot of unmanaged switches in the industrial world as well. But layer 2 is pretty predominant. A lot of DIN rail and panel mount stuff, whereas IT world's rack mount. Wireless is some emerging wireless technology in the industrial space, and a lot of wireless in the IT space with tablets and bring your own devices. And then, of course, on your computing side, hardened computers, and IT space is desktop. So, this to the outside world and to the internet. So, .443. The NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies, they're 800-82. And then Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has their standards. And what's common in all three of these is basically defense in depth and the concept of the industrial DMZ, or demilitarized zone. All right. So just to kind of finish up my part is just to talk about that defense in depth. So the product we're going to talk about today, the 5950, is just a piece in the overall defense in depth strategy for the ICS, Industrial Control System. So when you talk about defense in depth, there's many layers, right? So you can see all the way down to the device layer, application, the computer, network, physical, up to the policies, procedures, and awareness. So so basically it's a balanced approach. There are technical pieces to it, and there are non-technical pieces to it. So some of the non-technical pieces would be just rules, having rules for the environment, you know, standards, policies, procedures, risk management, right? And most importantly, educating your team about the rules, right? Because it does you no good to write all these policies and then not tell your people about the policies and how to actually follow the policies. Technical controls, so that's, you know, your typical devices or technical products, firewalls. You know, you can actually have policies that are written into the equipment to enforce those policies. Access control lists, right? And the key is, you know, you're only as strong as your weakest link. I think that's very, very evident in common sense. And vigilance, right? Just because we go out and we put this great new policy in place doesn't mean that it ends there. Right, so, and then no, you know, one size fits all. There's just no one product I can just say this is the magic bullet that does it all. That's actually this next slide. So there's no single product or technology methodology, right? So you kind of have to kind of figure out all the pieces of the puzzle. And again, so that's where the defense in depth security approach comes into. And it both addresses both internal and external security threats, right? So a lot of times we're thinking external threats, but a lot of times it's really the internal threat that we may be at most risk for. All right, so again, just reiterating, you know, education and awareness, right? Training your personnel is important. So having some physical, you know, limit physical access, right? It could just be as simple as locking the cabinet that the PLC is in, or locking the cabinet that the piece of equipment is in, or just some simple things like that, right? So that's the physical piece to it. And then there's network. So we have this, the CPWE is an acronym you'll see used a lot. That stands for Converged Plant-Wide Ethernet. There is an entire framework, security framework that is that's been drafted and written to help guide us on how to implement some of this defense in depth approach. And of course, computer hardening with, you know, keeping your patch management and your software, antivirus software up. Applications, so, you know, you could do things with authentication, authorization, and accounting in your actual code. And device hardening, such as change management procedures, communication encryption type products, restrictive access, which leads us exactly into where I'm going to give it over to Divya. I'm going to quickly make Divya the presenter, and Divya, you should get the request to do that. And from here, we'll introduce Divya Venkataraman. I hope I pronounced that last name properly. The product manager for infrastructure and security business. So take it away.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I hear you.
And then do you see my desktop?
Yep, we are good. Get this out.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Divya Venkataraman, as Wayne mentioned, and I'm a product manager in the network infrastructure and security business. And late last year, in October of 2016, I had the opportunity to launch the Stratix 5950. And it is our first security appliance within the Rockwell Automation portfolio, and we were very proud to have finally brought it out to market. As you'll see later on in the presentation, it really does differentiate us in a significant way. Yeah, I'm happy to be able to present it to you today. So I wanted to first highlight some industrial control system or ICS security trends and challenges that are being faced today. Essentially, when you look at either industry reports or from customer feedback that I've gained or that I gained from salespeople, what we hear is that the top attack concern for industrial control systems is really the fact that unintentional actions are being made by insiders, or actions are being made by malicious insiders, or even external attack concerns that all result in essentially downtime. And that's really what we're trying to fight against, as well as maintain brand equity, right? As well, what we hear is that computer assets such as HMI servers, workstations, really anything that leverages the Microsoft operating system are being reported as the control system components on the plant floor or in industrial applications that are the greatest risk for compromise. As well, we get news of increasing security incidents that are taking place that provide evidence that plant floor professionals really are unable to detect and prevent these intrusions from happening in a timely manner. As well, the number of ICS or SCADA cybersecurity incidents, as we see in the news, and I'm sure you all do as well, they continue to grow, and industrial automation professionals really don't have the ability to prevent these attacks, but now they understand the importance of securing their operations due to these very real-world security incidents that are taking place and events that are taking place that target industrial control systems, products as vulnerabilities. So as Wayne already mentioned, we don't believe one single product or technology can address these concerns, but what we are dedicated to doing is providing industrial automation security as a system to ensure the availability in the face of attacks that might happen internally or from external sources, and internal actions that impact essentially operations and impact your operations. So as I mentioned, Rockwell Automation is really dedicated to providing industrial security as a system, and there are 4 key tenets in which we do that, and it's all to do with securing your network infrastructure, access control and policy management, content protection, and tamper detection. And there are a variety of technologies that we provide that give you these specific values, but where the Stratix 5950 security appliance really fits in and where we've rounded out the portfolio is through controlling access to the network and detecting and preventing unwanted access and activity from occurring, which you can do using the security appliance. So some key differentiators that I wanted to share with you all is that what the security appliance does is it brings an industrially hardened security product into our portfolio, and it helps provide that increased visibility and control that you need through a key technology that we've finally introduced to market called deep packet inspection. And what all of the technologies housed within the Stratix 5950 allow you to do is protect your assets all the way down to the machine level. And as you can see from the picture there, we've introduced it in 2 different form factors, one with 4 gigabit copper ports, as well as a different SKU that provides you 2 copper ports as well as 2 SFP slots. So it gives you that flexibility depending on what application you would need to use it in. So some other differentiators that I wanted to highlight is that it is industrially hardened, as I mentioned, for high temperature demands ranging from -40 to 60 C. It has the SFP slots to enable that flexibility by allowing multiple connectivity options. Housed within it is Cisco ASA firewall and firepower technology that provide you the prevention services that you need to identify, log, or block potentially malicious traffic. So the ASA firewall technology has been widely deployed in the enterprise space, and it is really proven and well-established technology that Cisco has always had. Using it within the Stratix 5950 was great because we were able to leverage this technology, but also what this does is it integrates in intrusion prevention services that were acquired by Cisco through the Firepower acquisition that they made a while back. What deep packet inspection technology does is it provides the visibility and control that you need to implement policies that are very specific around specific applications or functions that you're trying to prevent from occurring on the plant floor. And the Firepower technology allows you to leverage that technology to write very specific policies that can prevent or detect certain things within your plant floor operations. As well, it's DIN rail mountable, which offers that increased design flexibility. Typically, firewalls are not DIN rail mountable, so we're very happy to be able to provide all this technology in a context that is usable for industrial automation environments. As well, we've launched a subscription-based license that you can leverage with the Stratix 5950 that ensures that the threat signatures that are on your appliance remain up to date. So some key applications that I wanted to highlight is that there's certain resolutions that you would need for very specific challenges that I've heard from customers that they face today, which is specifically lacking the visibility and control to prevent unauthorized personnel or unauthorized actions from taking place within your industrial control system. So say that you want to, at the end of the day, maintain the integrity of your operations on the plant floor, such as you want to prevent potentially tampered with firmware from being downloaded from a contractor's laptop, for example, to a controller, or just specifically prevent a certain IP address from making changes to your controller. What the 5950 offers you is intrusion prevention capability that gives you that enhanced visibility of what this specific action is using the traditional firewall functionality that is extended upon through deep packet inspection technology. So what deep packet inspection allows you to do is look more specifically into your Ethernet packet and see what the action is. So is somebody trying to make a firmware download from a specific IP address to the IP address of a controller? And you can gain that visibility through deep packet inspection or DPI, and then you can very specifically prevent it using the 5950's intrusion prevention policy capability. You can also ensure that there's threat control in place for vulnerable or legacy industrial control system devices and protect against communications from those components that I mentioned previously that are at a greater risk of compromise, like HMIs or contractor laptops. What the 5950 allows you to do is provide protection to vulnerable systems through the configuration of policies to block actions like SIP reads, like SIP writes, or SIP downloads between these at-risk devices where the patching of your legacy systems is just impossible, or it's considered very difficult to do. Because we understand that it's not always possible to patch your legacy systems. We understand that you can't always use back-to-back security for these very specific things. So the 5950 helps you address those challenges in a different way by using a security appliance. As well, we know of some other challenges from our customers, such as the fact that there's a lacking skill set amongst industrial automation professionals, and there's a common set of competencies that is generally lacking between IT and OT staff to manage these heterogeneous systems that previously didn't used to integrate or work together. Now, when you're connecting your enterprise and you have a more connected system, or you've converged all the way from the top to the bottom to a converged Ethernet model, it's difficult to resolve those competency problems that encumbers that visibility and control that you need all the way down to industrial control systems devices. What the 5950 allows you to do is use multiple Cisco technologies that are widely deployed within IT systems today and extend that visibility and monitoring of network communication between those industrial control systems devices all the way down to the plant floor. Some of those technologies that are integrated into the 5950 include NetFlow, which is also housed within third-party software, syslog, intrusion prevention, intrusion detection services, or OpenAppID, which can be leveraged to log and allow for central aggregation of plant floor network traffic. And these are all tools and competencies that IT staff already has today. They already use NetFlow and syslog pervasively. And so integrating in the 5950 would really not present much of a challenge because those common set of competencies already exist. This greatly differentiates us from providers such as Belden, where they're not integrating into systems and technologies that are used pervasively within the IT infrastructure today. As well, there's an enterprise integration challenge that can be resolved through Stratix 5950 as it provides support for Identity Services Engine, or ICE, to allow for that centralized policy management and remote access that is really required when you're integrating in a security appliance into your enterprise systems. So a key differentiator that I wanted to highlight as well is the fact that when you look at security, typically people consider confidentiality and integrity to be the common and most important tenets, but we understand that for industrial control systems, availability is the key thing that you want to keep in mind. And so an option that is configurable on the Stratix 5950 is hardware bypass, which essentially provides a high availability function that in the case of a power loss or if a catastrophic disruption occurs, the copper ports can essentially be configured to connect directly to one another, essentially bypassing the security and the inspection functions if that is required in this very specific use case. So what the Stratix 5950 really allows you to do is enable granular security to meet the differing security policies that might be required for very specific different security zones or different cell area zones. So when you look at the Stratix 5950, where they lie above is the level 0 to 2. So those cell area zones can be protected by individual Stratix 5950 security appliances to meet the very specific security policies that need to be configured for those individual security zones or for those individual cell area zones. So the policies that you need for very specific functions can be configured and allows for those different policies to be maintained for the different zones. What I also wanted to highlight is that we've heard from our customers that they are using zoning or segmentation practices already. That is nothing new to them. And so when you look at what an IEC 62443 architecture requires, it requires these zones to be segmented off such that between each of those zones, if there is a conduit of communications that is required, then a security appliance must be used as a barrier device between each of those cell area zones to allow for the segmentation that is required and implement a IEC 62443 compliant network architecture. So between those security zones, those barrier devices can be a Stratix 5950 because it was developed in conjunction with the IEC 62443 requirement specification. So it meets the requirements that are required for a IEC 62443 barrier device. So I wanted to touch a little bit more on what deep packet inspection really allows you to do. So as I mentioned, this technology has been integrated into the Stratix 5950. And one of the protocols that is kept in mind and is configurable for deep packet inspection policies is SIP protocols, as well as Modbus and DNP3. So very specifically, SIP protocol has been added in terms of the DPI or deep packet inspection policies that you can configure with the 5950. And what the Stratix 5950 firepower module is allowed to do is that there is a software component which adds on to the network analysis policy, and it is done so using a software component known as a preprocessor. So what the preprocessor is responsible to do is handle the interpretation of a SIP packet, for example, and it is being handled by that preprocessor, and it turns through the rules that you could configure on the Stratix 5950 to allow for SIP-specific deep packet inspection policies. So what DPI does is it extends upon the firewall's capabilities and allows for granular protection per protocol, like I mentioned, SIP, Modbus, and DNP3, for use in the industrial zone. It gives you that enhanced visibility and control to prevent erroneous activity or malicious activity, or simply to protect a vulnerable or legacy system all the way down within the cell area zone. So it really extends upon that ASA firewall technology that is typically used at the IT layer and now can be used to specifically protect industrial control systems, to specifically protect cell area zones. So what I had mentioned before in regards to App ID and intrusion prevention services, or IPS policies, is that it leverages DPI and it allows you to perform specific functions once the DPI policy inspects the packet at a more granular level. So after inspecting the packet using DPI, you can achieve granular control through those security rules that act on matched network traffic. And once you match that network traffic, you can make the determination whether or not to block a specific SIP DPI rule. So it allows you to figure out exactly what that known threat is and then to block it if it is a known threat. So I wanted to give a high-level example that really illustrates the power of DPI. So specifically, you can use block with reset SIP action policies like SIP reads, SIP writes, SIP administrative functions, RA-specific SIP reads or RA-specific SIP writes to essentially basically block something from happening if you don't want it to happen. So a good example of this is, say there's an operator workstation that should be blocked from doing a SIP firmware download to a ControlLogix controller. That can be specifically configured using a SIP DPI policy. Where we don't recommend this is you don't use it to block specific people from performing functions. The SIP DPI policies really work at a IP address layer, and so you would want to protect against a specific IP address making a firmware download to a different IP address. So I wanted to illustrate quickly what the modes of operation of the Stratix 5950 are. Essentially, when it is out of box, it works in inline transparent mode, which is kind of what it sounds like. It works in a very transparent fashion. So unless any SIP DPI policies are put in place or any firmware, any firewall policies are put in place, it won't prevent or stop anything from happening. As well, it can work in inline routed mode, where if you were to configure firewall policies or if you were to configure SIP DPI policies in inline transparent mode or routed mode, essentially then it performs those security functions. But what it does in inline routed mode is also acts as a router. And so it can also route your traffic depending upon where it is in the architecture. It can also work in a passive mode of operation called monitor mode, where copies of your packets are being sent to Stratix 5950, and it certainly won't affect your operations at all, but it will provide you that visibility into what your traffic is so that you can go and make actions on your traffic at either a later date once you've gained that visibility, or you can you can have somebody in specific, a person perform those blocking functions instead of having your security appliance block those functions for you. So I wanted to give a very real kind of picture of painting where the Stratix 5950 fits in its various modes of operation. When you look on the left-hand side, in inline transparent mode, you essentially want to actively protect the network by blocking or remediating potential threats from happening. So that's where it fits very much so in line in your architecture to block things from happening. In inline routed mode, you want that same functionality that you gain in inline transparent mode, in addition to wanting that routing functionality as well. In monitor mode, you want to detect things that are happening, but you don't necessarily want to act upon those potential threats quite yet. And that's where you can see it sits more within an office environment, where that mode of operation is being monitored by somebody in that more carpeted areas, let's say. So within your actual industrial control system architectures, where the 5950 fits is to provide protection for machines and skids, for example. So this is where it would be needed for use in deployments where the ability to protect actively the network is more important than traffic being affected by potential false positives. And so in this specific use case, you'd use it to segment a machine or a skid or a specific area, like your cell area zone. And this may be to support different security requirements between the larger industrial automation control system network and the machine or skid that you're trying to restrict traffic to. So as you can see in the red boxes there, that's where your Stratix 5950 acts as an IFW or industrial firewall, where it's being used in inline transparent mode to provide those protections to the skids or machines that are connected up below those IES or industrial Ethernet switches that your industrial control system devices are connected to. On the other hand, when you're using it for the same end goal, for providing protection to the machine or skid, you could use it in inline routed mode, as you can see in the red box there, where it's being used for deployments where in inline routed mode, it would be placed between the distribution network and one or more groupings of automation equipment that act as machine skids or both to protect and route traffic between each unit. So as you can see there, it's connected up to the one very specific Stratix 5950 in routed mode is being connected between the distribution switch and then two different networks that it would be connected to using those industrial Ethernet switches. So they would be different subnets that it would be protecting and then also routing traffic in between. In each case, the Stratix 5950 acts as the ingress and egress point to a production line containing those machines and skids where traffic can be monitored or controlled through firewall or deep packet inspection security policies, in addition to providing those routing functions. In this different topology, where it's being used in a redundant star cell area zone protection use case, this is where the Stratix 5950 can be used in inline transparent mode when a redundant star network configuration is required to meet redundancy requirements. So the network can be architected in a manner to support redundant layer 2 Ethernet channel links on the Stratix 5950 to provide you that redundancy. For this specific use case, the Stratix 5950 would be placed between the distribution switch and the plant floor equipment. In this different topology, in ring or cell area zone protection where a ring topology is being used, this protection use case is used to monitor and apply security policies to a ring architecture, such as REP or something like that. Two transparent Stratix 5950s would be placed between the distribution switches and the ring in this specific architecture. The 5950 would not be acting as an active standby firewall pair in this configuration. They're simply providing that firewall and possibly DPI functionality on both ingress points of the network ring in this case. While it is a valid use case, implementing it is not necessarily required because of some of the architectural limitations associated with this deployment. So it's certainly possible, but it's not one of those areas where we can provide CPWE guidance around. One of the specific reasons here is that any persistent connections that are established via the disrupted Stratix 5950 will need to time out and then reestablish via the remaining Stratix 5950 that has not been disrupted. So it could result in some communications downtime, which is the consideration here. In the passive monitor mode of operation, it is for use in deployments where uninterrupted connectivity is more important than active network protection. So essentially, the cell area zone monitoring use case is used to monitor traffic of interest without necessarily placing Stratix 5950 in line in your architecture to provide protection in that inline mode where it's providing that inline protection to a controller or a skid or a machine or cell area zone. So in this monitor mode where you can see it in the red box there, it'd be hanging off of your distribution switch and simply monitoring your network traffic. What I do want to highlight though is that the Stratix 5950 currently provides support for logging functionality for monitor mode, but it does not provide you all the visibility that you'd need for SIP protocol in specific. The reason for this is that the first and last packet of a persistent TCP connection between endpoints is only going to be logged. So essentially only the first and the last packet would be logged, not all the packets that fall in between. And so only that one event would be logged, which is the first one. And then when the TCP connection goes down, that's the next log that you would get. And so it's really not recommended to use the Stratix 5950 in monitor mode today if you're hoping to gain visibility on SIP protocol monitoring as well. So lastly, I wanted to highlight the CPWE program that Wayne already mentioned. Because firewalls are documented pervasively in CPWE holistic plan-wide security architectures. And previously, IDMZ or industrial demilitarized zone firewalls were used to create a security boundary between the enterprise zone and the industrial zone. Now, what the industrial firewalls such as Stratix 5950 can do is create those security boundaries between cellular zones and even provide those granular security boundaries to machines and skids, as I've been highlighting. So where the Stratix 5950 really fits within a CPWE architecture is, as you've already seen through the previous architectures, it sits beneath the distribution switch in its inline modes of operation, in transparent mode, as you can see, or in inline routed mode, which sits lower down in your architecture due to the performance and latency considerations that you typically have when you're routing traffic. So what the 5950 allows you to do is fit within a CPWE architecture and allows for those granular policies to be implemented much lower down within your CPWE architecture. As well, if you want to use centralized management software in order to manage multiple Stratix 5950 security appliances, you can certainly do that and don't need to leverage the on-box management that is provided with each Stratix 5950. The specific centralized management software that you would be using is a Fireside Management Center that Cisco provides, as well as the Cisco Security Manager. So I wanted to highlight that in conjunction with the Stratix 5950's product release, we are also very happy to be able to provide design and implementation guidance around how to use Stratix 5950 within your specific architectures, through the Deploying Industrial Firewalls within a CPWE Architecture Design and Implementation Guide, as well as a white paper that essentially outlines the concepts, requirements, and solutions that have been tested and validated by the joint Rockwell Automation and Cisco CPWE teams to provide you the very granular details that you need in order to properly deploy these industrial firewalls like the Stratix 5950. So essentially what's in the Industrial Firewalls Design Implementation Guide is a summary of the following. So it provides you a technology overview, so it provides you a lot more detail than I have provided today on the different modes of operation. It also provides you greater detail on the network protection that you can gain using the industrial, in terms of using the ASA or Adaptive Security Appliance Firewall technology that is housed within the Stratix 5950. It provides you greater detail on the firepower technology that is allowing you to configure intrusion prevention and detection policies along the context of deep packet inspection of SIP protocol. It also provides you greater detail associated with application use cases. So as I already showed you, equipment, machine, or SIP protection use cases, cell area zone protection, what different topologies it could be used in, and how you can use the management that is provided on Vox or the centralized management software that you can use to manage multiple Stratix 5950s. So that migration from local to centralized management use case detail is provided. And with that, that is all I had. Wayne, can you still hear me?
Unclear, thanks. We'll open this up to questions from the room as well as on the web. If you're on the web, I think the chat window works well. If you're in the room, Bill here, who was allowed to operate that particular station in that example there, will have the microphone in hand. So, the question is costs. I guess list price estimate on the cost there, Divya. Do you know that? Yep, still there?
Yes, sorry, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we hear you now. Yeah, so a cost. Was there a kind of a just
what's the list price?
Cost estimate?
Sure, yeah. So there are two different, essentially hardware variants that I showed you, right? So the all copper port one is ranges around about 4750, if I recall correctly, is the list price. And then the SFP option is a little bit higher than that. I think the differential is about $750 US list price.
Okay. Okay. Is that mic on?
Yes, I was wondering if what kind of management software does the management software referring to come with the package, or is it separate?
Sure, yeah. So it comes with on-box device management. So it's essentially Java-based, and a pop-up comes on when you connect to your Stratix 5950 with your computer that essentially allows you to use an on-box method to configure and maintain your Stratix 5950 if you want to use just the on-box one. That's no additional cost. That you just get that when you purchase the security appliance. If you want to centrally manage a number of these, or if you're already like a Cisco IT house, there are two centralized software management platforms that can be used. I just wanted to highlight this slide. Can you still see my desktop link?
Oh, sorry, I stole it back from you. Sorry.
No, that's totally fine. So essentially, I hope I answered it. So, you can use the on-box management, or you can use two different Cisco centralized management software packages if you want to manage multiple of them.
Yeah, sorry. I'll put myself back. I was showing the web page. The 5950 security appliance web page where there's data sheet or product profile and some information there, as well as I wanted to show the industrial security, kind of the general industrial security landing page or microsite that Rockwell has as well, which gives more information on the products and solutions, the security services available, which Rockwell can provide a complete turnkey on the security side with the security services team, as well as, which is actually a really nice resource to know about, is all the advisories, security advisories for all the products are listed at this site as well. So, any other questions for Divya? Oh, and so all the resources that Divya had mentioned, the firewall application guide, the DIG. I'll have all that posted as part of the resources on the blog page, as we talked about in the beginning there. So when I send out my follow-up email to everybody, you'll have a link, and they'll have all this information at our site. But of course, it's all available at Rockwell's site too. But I'll make it to where it's easy to find in one location for you at our page. All right. No other questions? Nothing from the web. All right. I guess we'll go ahead and conclude. Divya, appreciate you taking the time to do this for us. It's always good to have guest speakers present for us. It sounds a lot better than us talking down here. So thank you again.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you everyone so much for your time today.
All right. And we will conclude. We'll see you next month. Thank you.